first I would like to ask what idea brings you to join the Exo-Tibetan Society?
Well, I visited here in September of last year, and I met, among other people, Thurston, who's the head of the Tibetan Policy Institute. And I don't know, through some sort of conversations with him, I teach a course at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies called Grassroots China, the Social Consequences of Economic Development. And we came up with the idea that I would come to Dharamsala and present that course to the researchers at the Tibetan Policy Institute. So that's what I'm here doing. I'm here teaching them a very intensive course on grassroots China.
When did you first met Mr. Jalutundum, and what makes you write this book?
Well, I was introduced to him by a very good friend of mine whose name is Elsie Walker. And Elsie Walker is a very, very long-time friend of both His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Jalutundum. And Jalutundum had been thinking for many years that he wanted to write a book, that he needed to write a book. And nothing happened. And finally he asked his friend Elsie Walker to find somebody to write the book with him. And Elsie, well, she's a good friend of mine, but she's also read some of the other books that I've written, in particular The Private Life of Chairman Mao. And she just loves that book. She loves the first chapter of that book. So she thought I would be a good person to write the book with Mr. Jalutundum. So I met him first in Washington, D.C., when he came to visit me at my house with Elsie Walker. And at first I thought I wasn't going to do it. I was much, much too busy. I just couldn't do it. But sort of time went on and nobody else worked out, so there I was with Mr. Jalutundum writing the book.
When were you writing the book, what difference did you find between Dundum and the Dalai Lama?
Well, I start my introduction to the book by saying that they're very, very different men, really very different men. And I think the biggest difference is one is a spiritual human being and the other is a temporal human being who works in the world of real politics. So they're very, very different. In China you'd say they're the sort of the yin and the yang. They're opposites but complementary.
And I think the book irritated some administrator and organizer, even some personally. And how do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, we knew from the very beginning that the book was going to be controversial. And Mr. Dundum was quite prepared for it to be controversial. He felt there were things that he really, really needed to say. And I was also prepared for it to be controversial, and that's okay. There are things in the book, if you read the book to the very end and you read my afterword to the book, there are points where I disagree with Mr. Dundum, and I felt that I had to state my disagreements. And those disagreements include his view of the Banchan Lama, his view of Tsalung. So I feel that the research has not been finished. I think that this is one man's view, and it's an extremely important view. It's an absolutely necessary view to have. But I think that there are other points of view that also need to be told. And I hope that one result of this book is that more people are willing to tell their stories. And I don't think I'm finished yet either. I think I need to go and do some more research too.
That's true. How long did it take to complete the book? And when you were writing the book, did you get any troubles, problems?
Well, so how long did it actually take to write the book? It took 4 years, I think, from beginning to end. But the problem is that I still had a full-time job the whole time I was writing the book. So I could only, I would be able to spend some time with it, and then I would come back, and then more time. So, it took longer than it should have, just because I really still was very busy and couldn't devote full time to the book. And so what was your second question?
Did you get any problem when you writing the book?
You mean like with the Chinese?
Or Chinese, or with the Jalutundum or some?
No, Jalutundum and I disagreed from time to time. But I have to say, I spent a lot of time in Kuala Lumpur with him, and he was very, very gracious. He was a very, very gracious host. I still love his compound in Kalimpong. It's just a marvelous, marvelous place to be. So no, we didn't have any real problems like that. I mean, we disagreed every now and then, but no real problems. And I think, you know, we're prepared for problems. We think there may still be problems.
Yeah.
For me, you know, I've been going to China since 1978. But even before the book even before I agreed to do the book, I had been not given a visa to go to China. So I think this book only makes me more controversial with the Chinese, but already the Chinese found reason not to let me visit them.
You have read some books so far, and I think the most popular is the Private Life of Chairman Mao, right?
Right.
So why do you think it is so popular?
I think it's so popular because this is a man who spent 22 years right next to Chairman Mao. Mm-hmm. If you see documentaries of Mao, Dr. Lee is very often right there behind him, so he was with him every single day for many, many years. And he has a view of him as a human being, you know, not as the leader standing on the gate of heavenly peace waving to the crowds, but a man, how he lived his daily life. And I think it's a very, very revealing book about Mao. Mm-hmm. Unlike other people, I think Mao is a very complex man. I think he's a very complex man. And I think that book is probably as close to Mao as we'll ever get. As close and accurate a view of Mao as we'll ever get.
Yes. What would you like readers to learn from your book, and do you think your book will make a difference to this situation?
Well, the first thing to be said, I think the reason that Gyalo Dundruk wanted to write this book and thinks it's important is because he believes that sort of his time as having an influence is gone, that he's done everything that he could for the cause of Tibet and the cause of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and now it's time to pass the mantle to the next generation. So he wrote this book hoping to sort of set the record straight about what happened during his time, but also hoping that the new generation would take up the cause of Tibet and learn from what he would consider his mistakes. Learn from his mistakes and learn the lessons of, you know, his cause is not yet a success, but hopefully, he thinks hopefully that the younger generation will learn from his mistakes and be able to move forward.
It's the first print, right? So how many copies do you publish? And do you have any plan to translate it into other language?
I don't know how many have been published. It's been published by Great Britain, by the United States, and by India. And I have no idea how many copies were printed, and I don't know how many have sold. Are there plans to translate it into other languages? I wouldn't say that there are plans, but I believe that it's now being translated into Tibetan. And I've heard interest from other languages like German. And I think probably it also needs a French version because a lot of French people don't speak English. So there's talk in the background about translating into other languages, but I don't think there's been any decision.
Do you think this will translate into Chinese language?
Oh, actually, yes, of course. Yes, and there is definitely interest in it being translated into Chinese. My next stop after India is Hong Kong, and there are people in Hong Kong who are talking about having it translated. And I suspect, by the way, that parts of it already have been translated.
I see.
I'm sure the Chinese government is taking something of an interest in the book.
Yes, thank you.